All right, everybody, we're going to get started. If everybody could please take their seats. Okay. So how was everybody's breakout? Great? I attended Dr. Palamara's and it was fantastic on coaching. I'm looking forward to this afternoon's as well. All right, so a couple of housekeeping items. First, there's a sign-up sheet for those of you who are not on the AWIMS email list and are interested in receiving news from AWIMS. Please sign up in the back of the room. We also have our artists are diligently working on their big masterpiece over here, and there's room for several more art pieces. So please stop by the front here at some point and pick up another one or two pieces of the tissue to put your artwork on, as they do definitely have more space to put those pieces in place. I would like to introduce you to Sachin Simeon. Over there, Sachin, please raise your hand. So Sachin is going to be giving chair massages today between the hours 11:15 and 1:15. So she is a massage therapist with a touch of healing in Springfield, Illinois, and I want to really thank her from the bottom of my heart for being here. So just, one person at a time, please stop by. It'll be for maybe how many minutes, Sachin, per massage? 6 to 7 minutes. Yeah, and we'll do so on a rotating basis and keep it very sort of relaxed and informal. Before I introduce our next guest, we have a gratitude garden, which is right behind Sachin, with items donated from members of our planning committee. So my heartfelt thanks to each of them for those donations. And we're doing it in raffle format. So the first gratitude gift, and when I call your name, please go up and take your pick of whatever gratitude gift you would like. Jalen Newman. She'll be back? Okay, so Dr. Elamine will let her know when she's back in the room. I have Becky Wangard. Judy Thorne. Aisha Rafaquat. So her table will let her know. Okay. A blank here. Mosam Patel. Is Mosam here? Okay. And I have one more. Ashley Lynn. All right. All right. So our next plenary is Food Ease, plans to keep your body happy and mind calm, by my colleagues and friends, Dr. Stacy Sattovia and Dr. Leslie Smith. A little bit about Dr. Sattovia. She is a hospitalist and associate professor of clinical medicine here at SIU. She attended Illinois Wesleyan University for her undergraduate degree, attended medical school here, followed by a stint in University of Iowa Hospital Clinics for internal medicine residency training, followed by a chief year. She practices clinically as an academic hospitalist with an interest in quality and performance improvement, which led her to pursue a master's degree in business administration from UIS. She also serves as medical director for the SIU Office of Continuing Professional Development. A love of food and desire to positively and deliciously impact learners' nutritional knowledge, she will finish the Culinary Medicine Specialist Certification program at Tulane University in spring of 2019. And she has actually helped our next speaker, Dr. Leslie Smith, develop a local culinary medicine program. So a little bit about Dr. Smith. Dr. Leslie Smith, her medical education began with a master's in physiology and biophysics, followed by an MD at the University of Illinois, Chicago. After training in general surgery, she became intrigued with Asian medicine and studied in LA at Yosan University of Traditional Chinese Medicine and Emperor's College of Oriental Medicine. She then returned to Chicago and completed her acupuncture certification at Midwest College of Oriental Medicine, followed by her NCC-AOM board certification. She completed Harvard's structural acupuncture course for physicians and is boarded by the American Board of Medical Acupuncture. She's been studying nutrition and culinary arts for 27 years and has over 20 years experience in adult education, including a master's in medical education and leadership and a fellowship in surgical education. Dr. Smith is currently the Director of Integrative Medicine, the Director of Culinary Medicine, and an assistant professor at SIU School of Medicine. She serves on multiple boards and advisory panels relevant to acupuncture and integrative medicine. And without further ado, Dr. Sattovia and Dr. Smith.
Thank you so much. All right. So, good morning. Still morning, right? We still have another half an hour. So our plan today was to try to help busy professional women with one of the most critical things that we all have to do every day, which is put food and nutrition into our bodies. It's definitely not an easy thing when you're trying to balance a work life and a home life and then getting to the grocery store and getting meals on the table and so forth in the evening. So what we wanted to do is to try to help with some weekly planning so that we can do easy meal planning and preparation to kind of compare and contrast some recipes so that we can get a little bit more nutritional bang for our buck, and to transform the necessity of eating into from something that's kind of an onerous, like, oh my God, what am I going to make for dinner tonight, to something that's actually about self-care and pleasure. So the first part is I'm going to just kind of go over some of the logistics of how to do that, and then Dr. Sattovia is going to step in and augment a lot of the things that I'm going to sort of introduce the ideas of. So in terms of scheduling your time, how many of you meal plan? Okay. How much time do you spend on that on average per week? An hour? Less than an hour? 2 hours? About 2 hours for meal planning. Do you do it all on one day or do you spread it out? Spread it out one day. How many days a week are you spending time doing this? One day. One day, one day, one day. Okay. So if we average that out, it's about an hour a week just for the meal planning part. For those of you that are not meal planning, how are you deciding what you're going to make for dinner? Well, forget about the breakfast and lunch for the moment, right? How are you making those choices? How else are you making those choices? What kind of right. Is it a drive-through kind of a day? Or are you going to go and sit down and have a glass of wine with the meal? Or are you going to come home and like relax a little bit and make something in the kitchen? So yeah, that's a great point. What has your day been like? Now, how many of you are doing regular grocery shopping? Actually physically going to the grocery store and grabbing something? Okay, can I see the hands of the people that are not doing that? Okay, be brave, it's okay. No judgy. So how are you getting food into your body? Great. Okay, ordering online. What else are you doing? Meal delivery services. Okay. So that's shopping ahead of time with the meal planning, right? Drive-through. Okay. So in terms of how much time you're spending on the grocery shopping, is it about an hour a week, or am I underestimating how much time other people are hanging out in the grocery store? Hours? I could easily spend hours too. I have to set a timer on my phone, or it can easily turn into like a 3-hour, like, oh, let me play with this ordeal. Okay, and then in terms of cooking, how many people are coming home in the evening and cooking every day? Okay. How many people are doing that 2 to 3 times a week? Okay. How many people are not cooking at all for themselves in the evening at all? Okay. So my suggestion around those of you that are cooking a little bit less is to try to parse it out on the days that you know you're not going to be busy. I have Wednesday night clinic until 7 o'clock at night. I don't come home then and try to put something on the stove and make a meal at that point. So I try to divide up my cooking time to be on the weekend, either a Saturday or Sunday, whenever I have time, and then 1 or 2 days during the week, and then I reuse that food. So if you plan out that way, then I'm spending about 6 hours a week. And for me, this is breakfast, lunch, and dinner because I'm using my evening meals for leftovers or kind of reinventing them the next day. And I also, I've got recipes for this for anybody that hasn't come to our plenary or isn't coming to the plenary in the afternoon, for making all kinds of things for breakfast in the morning that are super easy and that mean that you don't have to try to get up in the morning and saute some eggs and so forth. So about 6 hours a week. If you assume that you're spending, if you're going to a restaurant or even going through a drive-through and spending about 30 minutes on average waiting for food to arrive, you're investing about 3.5 to 4 hours a week, not counting the time that it takes you to get to the store or to get to the restaurant, in terms of getting food on the table. The other thing about restaurant eating is that it's much more expensive. And generally, it's dinners only. We don't have time as healthcare practitioners to go out for lunch as much. And so you don't have a way to kind of reuse the food and to be a little bit more efficient. So the idea here is to try to tweak your weekly routine a little bit so that you're spending some time in the kitchen every once in a while. But then the next big question is, what am I supposed to make? So Stacy is going to come up with some inspiration, and we're going to go back to that in a little bit, so I'm not going to cover that part. But how to cook it can really make a big difference in your evening routine. A crock pot is one of my biggest allies. I can put all the vegetables together and the meat together, put it in the bottom shelf of my refrigerator the night before, take it out, put it on the countertop on low in the morning, walk out the door, and then I come home and somebody has magically made me dinner, right? The house smells like food. It's like warm, loving comfort. Even when my husband, who travels a lot for work, the crock pot is the only way that I find I can have the energy to kind of feed myself and to cook for myself as a single person. So crock pot meals are fabulous. The other great thing about crock pots is you can make big batches at the same time and then freeze aliquots of it, right? So if I make a big batch of chili or if I make a big batch of stew, yeah, that's my nerdiness coming out with using the word aliquot, right? You can freeze like portions of that, and then it's ready to rock and roll later in the week or later in the month when you want that flavor again, but you don't have time to cook. Or if you've got access to a refrigerator or a freezer at work, then you can bring those little aliquots to work with you, and that makes for a quick lunch on those days whenever you're just too tied up to be able to even run over to the cafeteria and grab something. Pre-baking and reheating is another great way of doing that. So making casseroles ahead of time that then just kind of go in the oven for 15, 20 minutes while you're setting the table, and helping with homework and all that kind of thing. I like to chop and prep and do a lot of that after I bring home the groceries. So the groceries, the vegetables largely don't go into the refrigerator until I have chopped them up, because I've already planned what my meal is going to be for the week, so I know how big my peppers need to be, so I chop them up ahead of time so that I just then sprinkle them into the stir fry or the egg pie or whatever it is I'm making. And that's a great way to involve munchkins in the process of preparing and cooking the food, making those kinds of food decisions. If they're old enough to wield a knife, then that's a great way for them to start playing with that when you're not under time pressure. Right? This is a Sunday afternoon activity. Okay, now we're going to go to the grocery store and then we're going to prep everything ahead of time. And it also really helps to encourage their creativity when it comes to putting food together. I do want to just put in a little plug about sustainable storage, because I've noticed since coming to Springfield that a lot of people are using single-use bags for these kinds of things. And so I would strongly encourage you to invest in a $20 set of reusable Tupperware for this process. It means that you don't have to put your vegetables in bags as they're coming home from the grocery store. You wash them and prep them immediately so they're clean when they go into your refrigerator, and it saves on a tremendous amount of plastic. And then ordering kind of the extra meals with the meal prep that people have already mentioned. If you're a household of 2 or 3 and you order 1 or 2 additional, then that's allowing you to have like lunch meals and so forth ready immediately. So in terms of the weekly routines, fresh food options that are not kind of like mom at the stove sort of thing, right? Meal delivery services, the recipes are really, really simple. Has anybody, I know a couple of you have tried them. Has anybody else, does anybody get these regularly? Okay. So the complexity of these recipes is really, really ice pick in the forehead straightforward. So anybody in your household that's kind of on the edge of learning to cook, my husband really does not like the process at all. But with these meal delivery services, I can ask him to start the process because everything is pre-done and the instructions are all written out. So this makes a really easy way to get other people involved in the process of cooking that otherwise wouldn't necessarily be you at the stove. And having a preteen or teenager take on the responsibility of making dinner one night a week will also help them, for the rest of their lives as they're going off to college and so forth. Freezing, one of the big mistakes that I made with my crockpot extravaganzas is that I didn't label things. And so then I've got all these lovely Tupperware containers of stuff that I'm not really sure what's in there. So please don't make that mistake. Get yourself a nice permanent marker or some tape that you can use to label the outside of your containers. And then I love to make a sauce or a soup or something like that and then reuse it in a different way. So if I've made chili, then the next night I might have taco salad, kind of reinvent it. Or the next night we might have nachos using that chili that I made, right? Stuff that's not processed cheese food product that's melted, but things that actually has food in it. Or spaghetti sauce, then you can redo that as a lasagna or put that on some pizza dough and create your pizzas at home, that kind of thing. We also, when I was a kid, used to have recycling nights once a week. So, those little bits of leftovers that end up otherwise going bad in the refrigerator, that makes for a good kind of fun meal. We would all fight over the macaroni and cheese and the canned corn, but that was, a thing. We had to draw straws. But overall, it works really well. And you can also reuse all those little leftovers as kind of a dump meal, right? So make a stew with all the leftover veggies that are getting ready to go bad, or a stir fry, or something along those lines where you're using up all of those leftovers. Okay, then sort of further down on the priority list is the order in, take out versions of that. My sister has come up with this really great idea, I think, of jotting down a list of restaurants that they normally order from, and then everybody's preferred meal from that place. So just in terms of logistics, right? You still have to get dinner on the table, even if you've had that extra situation in the ICU that you had to attend to before you go home. And this is a great way to sort of get things going while you're on the way home. Adding the phone numbers to your phone with the pre-order in the notes section of your phone, I think, is also a good way to sort of make that logistically easy. And then restaurants, knowing sort of the restaurants in your area that have more fresh options. We've got some new ones that have come into Springfield that are a little bit more healthy than some of the stuff that's got tons of processed chemical-laden food that can be a little bit better choices. Okay, any questions about any of that before we start talking about tweaking recipes? All right. So, how many of you are familiar with the idea of processed grains versus whole grains? Okay, what's the difference? I know it's a little intimidating to talk out in front of 120 people, but you were going to say? Right, so the grain has multiple layers on it. And so the outside of the grain is what gets removed whenever they process the grain. So whenever we see things that have the wheat germ removed, or oatmeal that doesn't have the husk on the outside of it anymore, then what we're left with is just kind of the soft, mushy part of the grain on the inside. A whole grain retains all of that more fibrous layer on the outside, and that's the part that actually has not only the fiber, but also all of the B vitamins and has a lot of the nutritional value of the grain. So even just switching from a whole grain pancake mix from a regular pancake mix will give you a lot more nutritional value, will bump up your fiber content and so forth. So look for things that have whole grain on the outside of them. That also includes things like brown rice as opposed to bleached rice, et cetera, et cetera. So if you have to chew it, and it doesn't just like stick to the roof of your mouth and sort of mush in your mouth whenever you eat it, that's better for you, okay? That has more fiber in it. Mixing whole grains, so putting the way that I got my husband to start eating this way was to do like you would do a puppy when you want to change its food. And started slowly mixing in some of the whole grain rice with the regular rice, and then the proportion got a little bit more, and then the proportion got a little bit more, and now he doesn't know the difference. Don't tell him I said that. But when you're trying to transition your family from one to another, that's kind of a good way of doing it. Until you figure out what kinds of additional grains you like, I really like the option to buy in bulk so that you can try this much instead of having to buy, a canister of something. The instructions for these are all over the internet. So we've got some whole grains in the back that are a little bit unusual, but if you want to learn how to make teff or you want to experiment with amaranth, then all you have to do is look up any number of recipes online and you can see what the ratio of liquid should be to the grain. I do also love the idea of tasting night to try to get kids and family involved in the process of making food. And so making small amounts of each one of these with then lots of different options for things to put on top of them lets children sort of get involved in the process. And it's kind of like a wine tasting except for minors, right? Instead of the rice or pasta, you can also try quinoa or bulgur or farro or millet or like amaranth, teff. All of these different kinds of grains are available to us in Springfield at multiple different grocery stores. So it's really easy to get small amounts of those and experiment with them. Any of those grains above you can use with a red sauce or a tomato-based sauce. You can use with a cream-based sauce. You can use with a brown sauce. You can use in stir-fry. You can use in soups. You can use in stews. So they're not something that you have to have kind of as your side over here as a substitute for a potato and then everything else on the other end, right? You can use it in the same way that you would use any of the other grains. And then I talked about this already, kind of switching over to these premixes. They do make pasta from quinoa. They make pasta from black beans. They make pasta from all kinds of other sources too. So it's just kind of fun to experiment with. Okay, now the veggies. How do you get your kids to eat veggies? We've been doing this project called Cooking for Compass this past year with some of the students that are interested in culinary medicine. And so that's really has been a year-long experiment that we've been doing about how to get vegetables into children's food. One of the most successful ways that we found was when we did tacos and we chopped up mushrooms very, very small, and we chopped up cauliflower very, very small, and we mixed it in with the taco meat and covered it with the taco seasoning. And so the texture was very, very similar, but we snuck in all these good vegetables. And then afterwards, you're able to tell, like, did you know you were eating mushrooms? Oh, it turns out I like mushrooms, right? And so then you've opened the door to this whole new conversation that you can have about that particular food. Preparing things in multiple ways and getting the family to sample. So you could try eggplant and you could try grilling it and baking it and sauteing it and steaming it and then doing a tasting party of all these different kinds of eggplant and see like, okay, well, I like it mixed this way, but I don't like it so much this way. It's a little too mushy for me whenever you saute it. Cool. Then you know how to make it next time, right? And we don't have to throw eggplant out with the bathwater. We can just tailor it to the textures that the children like. I also encourage kids to try one new veggie a week, right? Just one a week. So you were 4 the last time you tried green beans and you didn't like it so much, but now you're 5. And so now your taste buds have evolved and you're not as little as you were when you were 4. So now let's try green beans again, because this is kind of an adult food, right? So it's sort of also about the marketing of this process. And then exploring with them, what is it that they like or don't like about this particular food? Is it because it's mushy? Is it because there's not quite enough salt on that eggplant? What part of their flavor are they feeling and tasting? So it gives them a little bit more of a vocabulary to talk about food in a mindful way. Right? Instead of just saying, I don't like it, well, what is it about that you don't like? So that next time when you're revisiting your marketing plan, you have a way to kind of get into that conversation without making it obstreperous. And being brave and curious and so forth to try again in a few weeks is the growing up process. Okay. Now, sugar. Everybody loves to talk about sugar. Right? There are lots and lots of ways of getting the pleasure of eating something sweet without making your poor pancreas scream out in pain. And there's lots and lots of recipes online for sort of tweaking some of these things. One of my favorites is black bean brownies. If you Google that, you will come up with 50 different recipes. So the black beans have that same kind of gummy, lovely, mushy, brownie texture to them, but they have a ton of fiber and all kinds of other nutritional components in them that you won't get out of a brownie mix. Okay? And so that's a great way to increase the nutritional value and still have the pleasure of having a little bit of chocolate. Dates are super, super sweet. And so as a substitute for a lot of different things that you would put in oatmeal or that you would have as a little candy in the afternoon, my favorite is with a little bit of marzipan. That's my Dutch heritage, the kind of almond paste, with a little bit of orange peel on top. They're divine. And you get that sense of having the pleasure of eating something sweet without causing a lot of problems with your digestive system. Walter Willett talks about his favorite dessert is the 3 pleasures. And the 3 pleasures is the crunch of a little bit of nuts, the sweet of a little bit of fruit, and 1 small piece of chocolate. Not this size, but something that's more like this size, a square or 2, right? Carrots and peanut butter can be thought of as a dessert and can easily be incorporated as an afternoon snack, especially if you're interested in making your own peanut butter, which is actually super, super easy. We were talking about this in our session, that you can also encourage kids to pull a whole bunch of different nuts together, put them in your food processor, and just turn it on. So that can be cashews and walnuts and almonds and peanuts and so forth all together to make your own nut butter that then is not jacked full of sugar. Baked fruit is very, very sweet. Dehydrated fruit is very, very sweet. Has anybody ever tried warm grapefruit? Oh, it's so good. You guys are missing out. At this time of year especially, a half a grapefruit, stick it in the microwave for like 20 seconds and drizzle a tiny little bit of honey over the top. It's absolutely divine, and it makes a great dessert. Stacy's chocolate pudding, which is avocado, a little bit of melted chocolate, and bananas together in the food processor, has that like mouth feel of chocolate pudding, but again, a huge amount of nutritional components in there. Yeah, thank you. That's all her. And make your own energy bars is something else that she was talking about in the group. I also really like, instead of soda, you can make your own soda at home, just bubbly water, or get just club soda and then put a little squeeze of citrus or cucumber or mint or something like that in it, and then you're not getting all of that high fructose corn syrup and so forth in it at the same time. And then lastly, cooking is about fun, right? Food is something that gives us a lot of pleasure. And so if we come at the process of cooking and consuming food as like this heavy, onerous thing, then food becomes kind of an enemy. right? It's not really supporting our body. It's not supporting our soul. It's not supporting our daily process. So shopping for all the colors of the rainbow, picking things out of the farmer's market and just like picking them up to smell them and feel them and experience them before they even go into your system as a food. Don't be afraid to try new foods and kind of create that as a game, including your children and other people who are maybe not so adventurous that may live in your household and you might be married to. Pick one new food a week. Find other uses for known foods. A friend of mine recently introduced me to the idea of rhubarb in stews, and it's amazing. And then seasoning. The other thing that I did back here for our little demo is to just pull a bunch of random spices and herbs out of my spice rack. And when you start smelling things together, that's another kind of form of experimentation with food. And getting small amounts can make that really, really easy. So you're not committing to the enormous jars and bottles, but just getting sort of small amounts. Yeah, and then the last thing that I think is really pleasurable is going to a place to pick your own food. So whether that be pumpkins or strawberries or apples, then talking with your kids as you're going through that process about like, okay, now what are all the things that we know we can do with apples? Well, we can put them in our oatmeal in the morning. We can have a baked apple for dessert. We can make an apple pie. We can have an apple with peanut butter in the afternoon for a snack, et cetera, et cetera. So kind of the educational process as you're going through that. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Stacy now.
Thank you. Good. So Leslie did a really nice job thinking about how you may tweak recipes, how you can fit cooking into every evening, right, with some really good planning ahead. I noticed when she asked how many people cook at home every night, there were some people who really shot their hands up in the air. And then as the number decreased, some people were kind of like, yeah, that's me. Not so often. So let's do it again. How many people love to cook and can't wait to go home at night and cook? How many people love to cook? Okay, how many people say not so much? That was a little faster than last time. Okay, we live in a society right now that is, we have swung toward, it is very vogue to cook, right? In fact, our society watches more cooking shows than we spend time cooking, okay? We watch other people grocery shop more than we grocery shop. And that is not, the fact that you guys are raising your hand and saying, I don't do this at night is not an uncommon thing, okay? The people in this room are typically, I'm suspecting, gainfully employed, okay? You will fall sort of in the, what we would consider middle class or higher, if we do that kind of thing based on your income. Throughout human history, people in middle class and upper class incomes have either forced, coerced, or paid people to put dinner on their table at night, right? This is not new. That has happened throughout time. And then World War I happened and World War II happened, and World War II actually brought us a plethora of convenience foods and technologies, which is really cool. The microwave was invented by, I'm absolutely simplifying this, a radar engineer, okay, who was working with really powerful radars and noticed that the chocolate bar in his pocket was melting. Okay, so the microwave was born. Canned foods, frozen foods, okay? A lot of, the crock pot was a military invention. Even with the rise of these convenience technologies and foods came a rise in our guilt. Okay, and the judgment that we associate with cooking as a society. There was a really nice article in the Journal of Agriculture and Human Values in March of this year that stated that women are sort of at the sharp end of that, for sure. As Americans, we judge the quality of a family's diet and health we attribute that responsibility directly to the mom. Okay? 64% of women with children under the age of 6 are working. 64%. Okay, you guys are all working. 70% of those women are working full-time. Okay, so that changes this and maybe changes the pressure that people feel to do so. But single people, moms, dads, grandparents are all feeling this pressure to cook. And this was timely. This was an article that was in the Wall Street Journal just this weekend. And if you can't read that, Jane Black is a food writer. She's a journalist and has actually done some really nice work around food justice throughout the country, and particularly in really impoverished areas. So her writing is fantastic. But she said, you don't have to cook. There, I said it. The earth did not swallow me up. I have not been tarred as a bad mother, bad wife, or lazy food writer. ... Not yet, anyway. Okay, so she knows that pressure is out there. And so I'm going to maybe present a little more information and maybe give you some tools and sources of inspiration that will sort of reinforce this idea you don't have to cook every night. It's okay. Okay? Cook when it works for you. Cook when it's pleasurable for you. And then in other settings, make good food choices. Okay? So the good news is this fresh, healthy food is increasingly available with little or no assembly required. So Leslie touched upon food kits. How many people have done meal kits? Okay. Good. How many people are thinking about meal kits? Okay. How many people get coupons in the mail on a daily basis for food kits? Everybody. This is huge business. Okay. So what are your concerns with food kits? Meal kits?
The recipes seem really complicated.
The recipes seem complicated. Okay.
There's a ton of waste.
There's a ton of waste, yeah. Anybody who has done it is like, I just got 2 green onions in a bag, right? Or there's a lot of waste. Yeah, I got a clove of garlic in a plastic bag.
Plastic is styrofoam and dry ice, and it just feels like you're murdering the earth.
Yes. Yes. Agree. Anybody else have concerns about meal kits?
I like to pick out my own food. I like to look at my apples, look at my vegetables, and I like to own the selection.
Okay. You like to touch it, right? And pick it. Okay. Okay. And we're sort of creatures of habit that way. That's a hard habit to break, letting somebody else pick your food. Okay. Other concerns? They're expensive. They're expensive. Yeah. Yeah. No doubt about it. You're paying for the convenience, right? And that. So first thing, the recipes are complicated. There are a plethora of meal kit companies. Okay. They were touted early on as a way to save us. They were first aid, right? For saving us from, the evils of processed food and the expense and health expense of takeout meals, restaurant meals, because we tend to do a lot of that. And so the flip side is we have a really crowded marketplace of these companies, okay? Everything from HelloFresh, right? Plated. There's one called Gobble. 3 ingredients, 15 minutes, 1 pan. Okay, so you can go from Home Chef, which was created by some celebrity chefs, which is a little more complex, to things that are incredibly simple, to things that are keto, paleo, vegetarian. There are companies that will send you breakfast, lunch, and dinner options. There are companies that will send you smoothies that contain, all of your daily fruits and vegetables. Okay, there are lots of niche companies. So if a meal kit is something you're interested in, there are a ton of them. One of the biggest issues is we talked about what's for dinner tonight. There's a research company in Chicago called Food Genius, and they did a study of Americans' dinner habits. Guess what time people decide what they're going to have for dinner? I heard 4 o'clock. 80% of Americans decide what's for dinner at around 4 o'clock. Okay? And we're very spontaneous beings when it comes to eating. We start to get a little hungry and we're like, oh, dinner, what's for dinner tonight? Okay? So meal kits also, the goal was to help solve that problem. Okay? So we get people eating at home, we get them thinking about what's for dinner before 4 o'clock that night, and hopefully getting them eating something a little healthier. So a concern Dr. Todd had, which was something that after doing a couple of meal kit plans, I had the same concern. I've got all of this waste. And so I just out of interest looked to see, has somebody looked at this? And they actually have. This will be published in August of 2019. Okay? Comparison of life cycle environmental impacts for meal kits and grocery store meals. And this is published in Resources, Conservation, and Recycling. It's not a journal I typically read, but it does have a high impact factor. So this was a really nice study that they did. They looked at meal kits, and they looked at traditionally prepared grocery store meals. What do you think? Less waste with grocery store meals. Less packaging. More food waste. How about greenhouse gases? Higher for which one? Who says food kits? Okay, who says grocery store? Meal kits actually have 33% less impact on greenhouse gases. A lot of that has to do with what they call the last mile transportation costs. Okay, so I just thought this was really interesting because that is something, when people talk about meal kits, it's one of the concerns that people have. So the marketplace here, I told you, is incredibly crowded. The meal kit kind of business model is starting to lose some of its glitter. Okay, this might be really good for you though. It's starting to lose a little bit of its appeal. So Blue Apron has the biggest market share, about 35% of the entire meal kit market. In the last year, they lost 200,000 customers, which is about 25% of their subscription base. Okay? So these companies are starting to do fairly innovative things. Remember, what time do people decide what's for dinner? 4 o'clock. It's one of the barriers with food kits, actually. People have difficulty planning ahead. So large grocery store chains are actually buying these meal kit companies, and they're starting to sell the meal kits in the grocery stores. Okay? Plated is now owned by Albertsons. So if you go to an Albertsons grocery store or Safeway grocery store, which are owned by Albertsons, you'll find plated meal kits there. Okay? Blue Apron and HelloFresh have contracted with Costco. Home Chef, which I don't think you can subscribe to anymore, is contracted with Kroger stores. So you can buy Home Chef meal kits in their grocery stores. Okay? And the whole idea is, even though we have grocery store delivery, most Americans don't do that. We are creatures of habit. We still like to go to the grocery store, like Jill does. And so these meal kit companies are banking on the fact that we go to the grocery store and we go at 4 o'clock because we're hungry, right? And so you pick up a meal kit and a few other things and you go home. This business model is seeming to work really well. So there are a few other things. So meal kits in themselves are not a bad thing. Okay, if you're heading to the grocery store, it's not a not a bad way to try some new recipes. Okay, you may try some ingredients that you wouldn't necessarily try otherwise. I fell in love with rainbow radishes. I would have never probably bought a rainbow radish in the grocery store, but got one sent to me and I tried it and it was great. Plus it looked fantastic. This is a website called Epicurious. I'm going to show you a few things that may kind of help you on a daily basis. Has anybody seen Epicurious? Okay. It's a really nice website. They have a pretty good app as well. And the partners are Gourmet, Bon Appetit, Self, and some other. So some lay press that you would probably recognize. They have launched something called the Weekly Meal Plan. And if you go on the website, you can look at this week's, you can look at last week's, and what you'll find is kind of an integrated list. Okay, so if you scroll down, you'll see what the recipes are for the week. And then they give you a shopping list, which is really cool. Epicurious, I think, does it well because the grocery list, the shopping list, is actually separated by areas of the grocery store. So there's like produce, protein, shelf-stable things, box things that you may need. And so it tends to make it kind of easy. Okay. Martha, of course, got in on this as well. Yeah. And she actually has some pretty good selections of different dietary preferences. Okay. And that's done fairly well as well. Her website will actually link to local grocery stores. So if you want to select what you have, the grocery store can deliver it to you. And then I wanted to share just a couple of apps, and we're going to open it up for questions. So this, see the little lime, the bottom corner there, it says Mealtime. This is a meal planning app, again, integrated. So it has a grocery list function. But basically what you do is you go through and select from thousands of recipes what you're interested in for the week. And it'll kind of tell you if the recipes go together, in the sense that if you buy one item in the grocery store, you can use it for multiple meals. Okay, so you can pick one recipe and then it can suggest other recipes for you that may help better integrate sort of your shopping and cooking. Make sense? Okay. And the grocery list is on, so here's a meal plan, for example, and then the grocery list is on the right. And this one is really cool because it allows you to select what you already have, and it takes those off the grocery list. So what you end up with at the end is really the stuff that you need to buy. The top left-hand corner is an app that I just think is kind of cool and fun. I use it with my little person in the grocery store. It's called Food Switch. And it was actually developed by an Australian research company that was using it to sort of quickly evaluate the nutritional content, or nutritional quality, I should say, of manufactured foods. It accesses your camera and it scans barcodes. Okay? And what you end up with is a score from 1 to 5, and it looks at fat content, primarily saturated fat, the amount of sugar, the amount of fiber, a couple of other things, but it ends up giving you a score of 1 to 5. 1 is terrible, okay? 5 is nutritionally pretty good quality. So we have a rule when my daughter shops with me that almost nothing less than a 3 goes in our shopping cart, okay? But clinically, this is also helpful because you may have a patient who says to you, I go to the bread aisle and I don't know what to get, right? How many loaves of wheat bread do you need, really? I mean, there are a ton. How do I know if one is better than the other? Okay? You can scan any of the bread in the bread aisle. Just scan one, and it'll give you a list of comparable breads and breads that are better. Okay? So if the loaf of bread that you happen to pick up is a 2, it'll give you a list of breads that are higher quality. And it tells you the brand, okay? Gives you the description. So if you pick up a bread that's a 2, it'll say, hey, bozo, here are 3 that are right in front of you in the bread aisle that are a better quality. Okay? I think it's a fantastic tool, particularly if you want to kind of speed up the grocery store. One more resource that I want to tell you about is if you're lucky enough to get picked for the Gratitude Garden. I know there's a lot of really cool stuff over there, but Leslie mentioned the name Walter Willett, and I had to follow up. There's a book over there called something. It's a food book. You'll see it. It's a food book. But it's written by Walter Willett, And it's probably the best nutritional resource that is concise, that you can use for yourself, that you can hand to patients. It's written for the general public. Has recipes in the back. But it also, the first chapter, one of the first 2 chapters, is a really compelling discussion of how food guidelines are developed. Okay? And I will tell you that Walter is not a fan of the way that we do this. His science is really sound. It's a really good book. So, just to wrap up, I think that, remember why we eat. We eat to nourish ourselves, right? We eat to, or we cook. We eat to nourish ourselves. We cook to provide that nourishment. But it's also, it can be a gathering point, okay? And I don't let the stress of prepping and cooking rob you of the pleasure that you can derive, okay? Try to find that balance. Be creative, be thoughtful, infuse some energy in this when it works for you. When it doesn't, keep it simple, okay? There is nothing wrong with turkey on whole wheat bread and raw carrots for dinner. That's okay, okay? And kind of reset your family's expectations about that. It can be raw, it can be simple, it can be easy. It's more about this, okay, than the stress of feeling like you have to do it. So cook when it works for you, enjoy it, be creative. When it doesn't work for you, meal plans are okay. Use apps to kind of find some inspiration. The other thing about meal kits too is it shifts some liability. If you sit down to eat it and it's terrible, it's not your fault. It's the meal kit. And remember I told you that it is an incredibly crowded market right now? And that's the reason why you're getting so many coupons and flyers in the mail, is because they are grasping for business. So take advantage of that. Try one for a month, use a coupon. Next time you get a coupon, try another one for a month, okay? You do not have to be these companies' loyal customers because nobody is, okay? The average time that people use these subscription services is about 2 or 3 months, okay? So kind of play with them, have some fun. You might find your new favorite recipe. Okay, good. So we'll take questions. Or comments.
Okay, this is going to sound really lazy, but some of the reason why I don't want to cook is because I don't want to do the cleanup afterwards. Do you have any tips for that?
Yes. So crock pots, coming back to crock pots, love my crock pot. The kind that lifts out, so the crock comes out, it goes right in the dishwasher, right? Anything I bake goes on a sheet pan with parchment or foil, okay? I don't have to clean that. Anything I can make in one pan, I do.
For cooking utensils, is my on? Is that better?
You're off. You're on.
For cooking utensils, silicone goes right in the dishwasher. And so they make like little scrapers that have a wooden handle and then the silicone on the top. Don't get those. Get the kind that are silicone all the way through. So then bloop in the dishwasher. And the same thing with the metal that can scrape the bottom of your crock pot and make you grouchy. So silicone works really well.
Great, thank you.
Crockpot liners. Oh, you know what I forgot to mention? There are meal kit companies for crockpot and Instant Pot people, where it comes in a bag and you just put it in. And these are not like the things you buy in the freezer section. They actually are nutritionally pretty robust, and the stuff is fresh. So you just buy it and throw it in the crockpot.
Do you have any comments on what to cook in Teflon, ceramic, stainless steel? There's controversy about that?
So most of the Teflon kinds of cooking surfaces now don't have a lot of scary stuff in them.
Yeah.
So the really cheap stuff that you're getting for $5.99 at the grocery store down that aisle, I would not recommend purchasing those kinds of things. But anything that you're getting that's a little bit of a higher quality pan doesn't have the same scariness that it used to have. So most of the cooking pans will no longer kill us, which is helpful. A lot of the plastic stuff you still have to kind of look for the stuff that's BPA free and so forth, but generally most of the cooking pans don't. My current favorite is Scan Pan because the anti-stick coating is baked into the metal, and so you can use metal stuff and really scrape the heck out of the bottom of that. And the way that Teflon used to peel off and get into your eggs and be really scary, this does not do that. It stays because it's baked in.
And remember, I'm sorry, you can use that to your advantage too. Cast iron is a fantastic cooking service that
Absolutely.
imparts iron into your food, actually.
And you don't wash it with soap and water.
No.
Cast iron, so that helps with the cleanup issue.
Yes, cast iron is your friend. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really.
These stores locally that you recommend, like that you shop at? Food Fantasies is good. I love Aldi, obviously. Is there any other stores that you recommend, like bulk buy and besides Hy-Vee?
Personally, I love the ethnic markets that we have in town. I still don't know all the vegetables when I go into the Asian market or into the Indian market, and I love to have conversations with folks about like, well, what is this thing and how do I cook this thing? And go home and I do like the little experimentation and cook it lots of different ways and put lots of different seasonings on it and expand my own flavor palette. So I love both of those stores for that reason.
I would say do whatever is easier for you too, right? If I'm on my way home from work and need something, it's what's closest.
Yeah.
And most people typically have a home grocery store, the place where they know where everything is. So make it easy for yourself too.
I'll also just mention that Aldi has made a commitment to not have any conventionally grown vegetables anymore. Everything that you buy in there is organic. And when you price compare what is happening at Aldi versus the other grocery stores, like it's pretty reasonable.
You said that there were some healthier restaurants around. Which are the healthier restaurants?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because the question was, where are the healthier restaurants in town?
Yeah.
I try to go to restaurants that are independent as opposed to chains. That being said, I did eat at Olive Garden last night, and I really appreciated the fact that they had like all the calorie counts for all the different things on their menu, right? That really changed what I was anticipating that I was going to order. And so getting salad with a little bit of pasta that had this particular sauce on it as opposed to the 3 cheese sauce or whatever it was, like made a huge difference in my calorie count for the evening, and I still got my once a week pasta meal. So it's hard to say like this is a healthy restaurant and this is not a healthy restaurant. I think in most restaurants there are lots of good choices, but I do like the idea of supporting independent businesses in general.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. I've been hearing a lot of people raving about air fryers. What are your take on air fryers?
I don't have one, or not yet.
Yeah, I don't have one either. I've been reading a lot about them, and I haven't actually seen one in action. That particular texture is not something that I crave, and so it's not something that I've really looked for. I prefer things that are crunchy from roasting or from grilling or whatever. I don't really like that fried feel. So,
with that being said, it's a fantastic alternative in terms of decreasing saturated fat in a lot of things. It's basically a tiny convection oven, right, in a very small space. Yeah.
I'm just confused what cooking oil to use because the recommendations change all the time. So what is last week's recommendation on cooking oil?
So the issue with oils is that when they go rancid or when they are heated above their smoke point, then they're not so bueno for your system, okay? That's just kind of the big gestalt of the argument there. So things that have structures that break down at a lower smoke point are not things that you want to grill with. So things that we typically think about with Asian cuisine can handle the high heat of a wok. So that's how I remember which ones work well with higher smoke points. So if I'm going to saute something in a wok or if I'm going to put something on the grill, I use grapeseed oil or sesame oil because they have a very high smoke point. If I'm doing something on my stovetop, I either use ghee, which also has a very high smoke point. Ghee is clarified butter, and it's stable on the countertop. It's not going to go bad, so you don't have to put it in the refrigerator, and it has a nice high smoke point. It's got great oils in it, but you can't use it if you're a vegan. So in that case, then I would use for my stovetop probably olive oil.
Canola oil as well.
Canola is also good for that, yeah.
Has good fats in it. Probably the only thing to really stay away from when you cook. Does anybody know what oils have the highest saturated fat? It's very popular, has been very popular the last few years. Coconut oil is loaded with saturated fat. Basically, if it looks like a solid at room temperature, don't put it in your body. Use it for your skin. Just a really high saturated fat content.
Yes.
It doesn't hold up to heat very well like that. Yeah.
I think that's probably all the time for questions that we have. So, yeah, did you have one last one?
You didn't mention vegetable oil, and like she said, sometimes it's good, and other times we're told no. What is just regular old vegetable oil?
So vegetable oil has a huge amount of corn oil in it. Which I try to avoid. There's pretty solid literature across the board that is not a particularly healthy oil.
Yeah, it's kind of in the middle. There are better choices. Olive oil, canola oil are much better choices.
Yeah.
Some avocado oil, you can just, it depends on what you're using the oil for. If you're adding it for flavor, play with some of these oils. You can get them in nice small containers or small bottles. Yeah. And you can play with some of that flavor a little bit.
Yeah, Robert Seafood has a huge oil bar.
Yes.
And so you can go in and try little snippets of them and pick which ones you like. If you're talking about like some of the nut oils, the walnut oil and things like that, don't cook with that. That's great for drizzling over salads and things like that, but not so good for cooking.
Dr. Smith. I'd like to thank Dr. Sattovia and Dr. Smith for a wonderful session. I actually tried Dr. Sattovia's chocolate banana avocado pudding, and it is delish. So please take full advantage of that this afternoon sometime. So we're going to move on to lunch. I'm going to have Laura Worrall explain some of the logistics here in a minute, but the schedule will be such that we're going to give everybody some time to get their lunch, bring it back to the room. Dr. Sattovia and Dr. Smith will take everybody through a 5-minute mindfulness eating exercise, after which feel free to finish your lunch. And don't forget to go around the room and see posters that are representative of research not only conducted through AWIMS, but through the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion's HEAL Scholars program. And so that stands for Health Equity Ambassador Leaders. Not only in our SIU community, but from the community around us, they're doing a lot of incredible work. I'm going to hand it over to Laura.
Thank you. Okay, lunch is in the little room over here. I think if we go in the door where Judy's standing there waving, go in that door, use both sides of the table. It'll kind of get everybody through a little quicker. Come out the far door, and then come back in here and sit. I did want to mention that on Monday, you will receive an email with a link to the evaluation for today's conference. And then once you have completed the evaluation, you can print out your certificate. The evaluation will be open for 30 days, and we'll send you a couple reminders during that time. And we really do appreciate your feedback. This is only the second year we've done this conference, so you can help us already get a jump on planning next year's conference. So help yourself to lunch and enjoy.